Is this tiny coin from 1984 worth more than you think? You won't believe the stories hidden in this humble penny. Stick around, because you're about to discover some shocking secrets about the 1984 US penny. You might just have a goldmine on your hands, and I'm not talking about the typical 1-cent variety. Could a simple penny be worth hundreds, thousands, or even millions of dollars? Keep watching to find out. Welcome back to World of Coins HD, where we dive deep into the world of coins, treasure hunting, and hidden gems that could be sitting in your pockets right now. Today, we're going to uncover some unbelievable facts about a penny from 1984. A penny that may look like just another coin from your change jar, but trust me, there's much more going on under the surface. You may think you know what a penny is worth, but after this video, you'll never look at a 1984 penny the same way again. From its fascinating history to rare variations, and some possible mistakes that could make one of these pennies worth a fortune, you won't want to miss a single detail. But first, let's go back to the basics and understand the history behind the 1984 penny. In 1984, a lot was happening in the world of coinage. The United States was going through a period of transition, both politically and economically, and it was reflected in the way our coins were made. But did you know that 1984 was a turning point for American coins? In fact, there was something strange going on with the pennies minted that year, and what happened might surprise you. The penny has a long, rich history. It was first introduced in 1793, and it's been a staple of American currency ever since. The front of the penny has featured the image of President Abraham Lincoln for over a century, and the reverse design of the coin has changed several times throughout the years. However, in 1984, there was a subtle shift in how coins were being produced. It wasn't just a change in design, there were underlying factors, like economic pressures and new minting processes, that made the penny from this year unique. By 1984, the US was recovering from the early 1980s recession, and inflation was a major concern. The mint was under pressure to keep costs down while continuing to produce billions of pennies. This had a direct impact on the materials used and the coin production process. Copper had been the primary material in pennies for over 100 years, but by the 1980s, copper prices were climbing, which led to discussions about possibly switching to a cheaper alternative. However, the 1984 penny still retained its copper core, and that's one of the reasons these pennies are so highly sought after by collectors today. But here's the real twist: did you know that some pennies from this year may have been produced in error? And those mistakes could make them worth hundreds, maybe even thousands, of dollars. That's right, a penny that's supposed to be worth only 1 cent could potentially be worth much more if it was struck incorrectly. So, keep watching because you'll need to know how to spot these hidden treasures in your collection. Now that we have a little background on the 1984 penny, let's take a closer look at how these tiny coins were actually made. The US Mint produces billions of pennies every year, but not all of them are identical. The coin production process in 1984 was typical for the time, with pennies being struck using the traditional methods. However, 1984 was a year of transition. The Mint had started experimenting with newer techniques, and this could explain some of the anomalies that popped up in the production of the 1984 penny. The coining process begins with a mix of metals, primarily copper and zinc, being heated and shaped into blanks. These blanks are then struck with a die to produce the final coin. In 1984, the minting process remained relatively unchanged, but the cost of copper continued to rise, pushing the mint closer to finding a cheaper material for pennies. Still, they stuck with copper for the 1984 penny, and collectors today are paying close attention to these copper-based pennies because of their unique composition. But here's the real question: what if I told you there were some 1984 pennies that look nothing like the rest? These pennies, while still part of the official 1984 minting, have some notable differences that most people miss. These variations could make your penny much rarer and potentially much more valuable. Stick around, and we'll show you exactly what to look for. Now, let's talk about the most common 1984 penny variations that you might find when you search your pocket change. While most of these pennies are worth just 1 cent, some are worth much more, if you know what to look for. The standard 1984 penny is nothing special, right? It's got Lincoln's face on the front, with the iconic shield and stars design on the back. But what happens when you examine the details more closely? There are, of course, differences in mint marks. For example, you might find a penny with a D mint mark, indicating it was struck at the Denver Mint, or an S mint mark, indicating the San Francisco Mint. These mint marks are important because they can affect a penny's rarity and value. But let's be honest, these variations are still pretty common, and they don't usually add up to a huge increase in value. Now, here's where things get interesting. There's a misprint you need to watch out for, an error so rare that it could change the value of your penny overnight. That's right, keep your eyes peeled, because the next variation we're going to discuss is the real treasure you'll want to find, the double die obverse penny. This is where the real magic happens. The double die obverse penny is an error that occurred during the minting process in 1984. This mistake caused the word Liberty and the date, 1984, to be struck twice, creating a double image. This might sound insignificant, but it's a big deal in the world of coin collecting. Double die errors are among the most sought-after mistakes, and a 1984 double die obverse penny could be worth thousands of dollars. You'll know you have one of these rare coins by looking for the distinctive doubling on the Liberty and 1984 inscriptions. The best way to identify these pennies is with a magnifying glass or a microscope, so get your tools ready and start inspecting those pennies closely. But that's not the only rare version of the 1984 penny. There's another variant that could blow your mind. Stay tuned, because we're going to talk about it next. Now, let's talk about how to identify whether your 1984 penny is one of those rare, valuable errors. With the right tools and a little know-how, you could be holding onto a treasure without even knowing it. To spot these errors, you'll want to carefully examine the inscriptions and details on both the front and back of the penny. A double die obverse will show noticeable doubling on Liberty and 1984, but that's not all. There are other errors you need to be aware of, like misaligned dies or incomplete strikes. The key is to carefully study your penny and look for any abnormalities that could indicate an error. So, how do you go about identifying these valuable pennies? Start by using a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe to get a closer look. If you don't have one, it's time to get your hands on one. Trust me, they'll be worth their weight in gold when you find a valuable coin. Make sure to look closely at the lettering, the date, and even the edges of the coin, but don't stop here. The next step could be the game changer. How much are these errors really worth? This is the part you've been waiting for. Some 1984 pennies with errors have been sold for astronomical prices at auctions. So, how much could your rare penny be worth? The answer might surprise you. Most of the 1984 pennies in circulated condition are worth only 1 cent, but when you start looking at the rare variations, like the double die obverse, things get interesting. Depending on the condition of the coin, a 1984 double die obverse penny could be worth anywhere from $300 to $2,000 or more. And if you have one in pristine condition, you could be looking at a sale price of several $1,000s. But the value doesn't stop there. Some 1984 pennies, especially those with multiple errors, have sold for even higher prices. It's not unheard of for collectors to pay over $10,000 for a rare 1984 penny with multiple minting mistakes. So, what should you do if you find one of these rare pennies? You could be sitting on a small fortune without even knowing it. First, you'll want to get your coin appraised by a professional. Numismatic experts can help you determine the value of your penny based on its rarity, condition, and specific errors. You can find reputable dealers, online auction sites like eBay, or even attend numismatic shows to find buyers who are looking for rare coins. But wait, before you rush to sell, there's one final trick that could drastically increase your penny's value. Trust me, you'll want to hear this last tip before you make any decisions about selling your rare coin. In our next video, we'll dive into even more rare coins that could be sitting in your collection. You won't want to miss it. Until then, happy hunting, and don't forget to check your change. Who knows, you might just have a treasure waiting to be found.